Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the dusty trade routes and sun-baked landscapes of medieval Ethiopia, where salt wasn't just something you sprinkled on your dinner. It was currency, identity, and the stuff of survival. Picture this. You're trudging beside a caravan of camels, each one loaded down with slabs of dull, dusty white salt, the kind that scrapes your hands when you touch it. The air is hot, scalding really, and your sandals are full of sand. Wind gusts blow fine grit into your eyes, and somewhere behind you, a donkey lets out a noise so pitiful, it sounds like it's complaining about inflation. You probably won't survive this week-long journey to the salt flats unless you're unusually fond of blisters, lukewarm goat milk, and chewing on sun-dried dates that taste like regret. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far away, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where all of you are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The trail before you is long, stretching like a tan ribbon through the Ethiopian highlands and into the low, dry belly of the Danakil Depression. You walk with traders, camels, and herders, some barefoot, some with crooked walking sticks carved with charms. All of you are moving in one direction, towards salt. For medieval Ethiopia, salt was the stuff of empires. Not just a flavor enhancer, but the cornerstone of an economy, a reason to build roads, and something people were willing to fight over. The strange thing? These weren't little table shakers. Salt came in giant rectangular bricks known as a mola, each weighing about 5 kilos. When carried in bulk, they looked more like fence posts than food additives. Stack enough of them and you're suddenly rich, or at least sweaty and sore. You glance ahead and see one of the camels stumble slightly, its burden shifting with a dusty thunk. The air smells like hot wool and rock. Traders around you joke quietly in a mixture of languages, Afar, Tigrinya, Amharic, trading barbs as much as goods. It's a weirdly peaceful atmosphere considering the stakes. One camel veering off a cliff and someone's entire investment literally crumbles into sand. The trail you're walking on has existed, in one form or another, for over 1,000 years. Known loosely as the Salt Roads, these were unofficial yet well-worn paths that connected the highlands, where the people lived, to the brutal salt flats where the stuff was mined. The camels, of course, were the true workhorses of this operation. Each one could carry up to 30 or 40 bricks, balanced in wooden frames that creaked like tired knees with every step. And no, there wasn't a medieval Ethiopian version of Yelp to rate the quality of your camel. You just kind of had to trust the guy who sold it to you. Here's the odd part. Historians still argue whether these routes were state-controlled highways or more like glorified goat tracks passed down through tribal knowledge. There's very little in the way of mapped roads, but plenty of oral stories, riddles, and cautionary tales about which rock formations to trust and which ones hide bandits. Speaking of bandits, you pass a group of guards on foot, lazily cradling spears. They're more ceremonial than useful, but their presence is supposed to deter petty theft. Salt was valuable enough that some traders formed little traveling alliances. Not just for safety, but because dividing up camel care duty was better than doing it all yourself. You notice a child riding sideways on one of the camels, humming a tune with an impossibly calm expression. It's said that by the age of 7, many Afar children could guide a salt caravan without supervision, and probably outsmart you in bargaining while doing it. The rhythm of the caravan is hypnotic. Each footstep crunches lightly, almost like a metronome. The sun arcs overhead, slow and oppressive. You sip from a goatskin flask and immediately regret it. It tastes like warm olives mixed with desert air. Someone offers you a bite of roasted barley and a dried fig. It's chewy, possibly eternal. As the hours drag on, you begin to understand just how massive this operation is. At its peak, the Ethiopian salt trade powered entire economies, dictated political power, and influenced settlement patterns. Kingdoms rose near salt routes, and cities blossomed at their crossroads. Salt wasn't just important, it was elemental. It preserved food, flavored stews, cleaned wounds, sealed deals, and even protected against evil spirits, depending on who you asked. And here you are, trudging right through the heart of it. Somewhere along the trail, an older trader leans over to whisper something about salt ghosts, spirits of travelers who got lost in sandstorms and now haunt the edges of the trail. You nod politely and decide not to wander too far from the group during bathroom breaks. As the sky begins to turn orange, you spot a distant encampment. Low tents, smoke curling from fires, and the soft bleating of goats. You've arrived at one of the caravan way stations where salt will be stacked, counted, bartered, and briefly admired before continuing its journey. And as you settle by a fire, the traders begin a well-practiced routine, loosening camels' loads, checking for salt brick damage, and sipping something that might be tea or might be despair in liquid form. The stars appear in bursts above you. The desert, once a noisy furnace, grows quiet. You lie back on a rolled mat, the scent of wood smoke in your nose, and listen to the faint crunch of hooves still arriving in the dark. You've only just begun your salty adventure, but already the economy of Ethiopia feels like a living, breathing network of dusty footsteps and glittering bricks. And if you think carrying salt sounds odd, just wait until you find out who ate it, who worshipped it, and who tried to steal it with a goat-drawn cart. The smell of something very vaguely edible. Barley porridge bubbling in a pot that looks like it's survived a siege. The sun hasn't risen fully yet, but the camp is already buzzing. Traders brush grit off their cloaks, camels snort and stomp in protest, and someone is yelling about a missing sandal like it's the most valuable item in the caravan. As you stretch, still half asleep, you remember something odd from last night's fireside chatter. Someone mentioned that salt was once used as money here. Not metaphorically, literally money. And not just in Ethiopia. Across much of the ancient and medieval world, salt was so essential to life that it became interchangeable with currency. But here in Ethiopia, salt is cash stuck around longer than almost anywhere else. Welcome to an economy where your wallet might leave white crumbs, and your fortune could melt in the rain. You glance at a pile of neatly stacked amole bricks, those chalky salt slabs, carved and shaped into oblong rectangles with beveled edges. They look unremarkable, like poorly made paving stones. But don't be fooled. These were as good as gold in medieval Ethiopia. A single amole might buy you a bundle of firewood, a goat, or even a hand-woven cloak. 4 or 5 could get you a good donkey. 10? A decent house. The bricks were light enough to carry, heavy enough to feel like they meant something, and tough enough to survive a few accidental drops, though nobody wanted a crumbled amole. That was like showing up at the bank with shredded bills and a hopeful smile. Of course, using salt as money had its quirks. First off, it was delicious. That's a problem. You couldn't just leave your fortune sitting in a basket when hungry travelers were nearby. Second, it was useful. People chipped off little pieces to flavor their food or preserve meat. So yes, your money could slowly disappear, bite by bite, if you weren't careful. And third, salt was heavy. Not Roman gold heavy, but enough to make long-distance transactions a workout. Imagine trying to pay taxes in solid mineral form. Oh wait, you didn't have to imagine. In medieval Ethiopia, that was just called Tuesday. Historians still argue whether salt became money because it was valuable, or if it became valuable because it was money. A kind of economic chicken or egg question, but with more sweat and fewer feathers. Some believe the use of amole as currency dates back to the Aksumite Empire, one of Ethiopia's ancient powerhouses that thrived between the 1st and 7th centuries CE. The Aksumites minted coins, sure, but the real backbone of trade was still natural resources. Ivory, incense, gold, and of course, salt. As coinage faded and regional kingdoms rose, salt stepped in as a stable, barter-friendly replacement. By the medieval period, salt wasn't just a market item. It was woven into royal economics. You could pay taxes with salt, you could settle debts, you could even offer it as a wedding dowry or temple donation. And then there was the symbolism. Salt represented purity, preservation, and permanence. In Christian Orthodox traditions, which were deeply rooted in Ethiopian life, salt featured in blessings, baptisms, and holy feasts. To gift someone salt was a gesture of respect. To withhold it, a subtle insult. Walking among the traders now, you see people bartering with casual precision. A woman holds up a carved wooden comb and negotiates with a man holding 2 small amole bricks wrapped in goatskin. They haggle, adjust, nod, and complete the exchange without a single coin changing hands. It's a reminder that this wasn't a poor man's currency. Salt was respected, standardized, and widely accepted. In fact, Ethiopia's amole system was so reliable that foreign merchants, especially Arab and Egyptian traders, had to adjust their pricing strategies just to compete. Some of them found this incredibly frustrating. A French traveler in the 19th century once wrote that Ethiopians laughed at him for offering metal coins, saying, "Can you eat that?" A fair point, really. Still, it wasn't all smooth trading. Not all salt was created equal. The highest quality amole came from the Danakil Flats, pale, dense, and evenly shaped. Inferior salt, like the crumbly stuff from inland quarries, fetched lower prices and sometimes got rejected entirely. This led to a form of mineral snobbery. Some towns even hired inspectors who could tell good salt from bad just by tapping it with a stick and listening to the sound it made. A crisp clink meant profit. A dull thunk? Sorry, friend. Try again next week. Of course, the economy had its loopholes. Some clever folks carved counterfeit amulek out of gypsum, white clay, or even painted wood. There were entire court cases where salt forgers were punished. Not with jail, but with forced labor in the very mines they tried to fake. Irony. Thy name is mineral fraud. You pass an old man sitting cross-legged near a fire, whittling a small piece of salt into the shape of a bird. It's a tiny carving, almost a toy, but it reminds you that this currency was tactile. Something people touched, shaped, carried, and used daily. Far more personal than a bank app or paper bill. And then there's the camel math. Each camel carried between 20 and 30 amole, depending on size and temperament, because yes, some camels were known to accidentally sit down mid-route and refuse to move unless bribed with extra water, or bizarrely, a favorite song. Some traders swore by lullabies. Others carried salt specifically to feed their beasts, reinforcing the absurdity of paying your worker with literal edible cash. By midday, you've seen 6 trades, one heated debate about brick purity, and an enthusiastic retelling of a time someone tried to buy a wife with 7.5 amala and a very persuasive poem. It didn't work. The poem apparently was terrible. As you sip some salt-infused tea, don't ask, you start to appreciate the delicate dance that was medieval Ethiopian economics. No stock exchanges, no banks, just slabs of earth's bone, hauled on camels' backs, circulating through the highlands like the slow heartbeat of a civilization. And you're just getting started. The next stop? The royal courts, where taxes weren't always collected honestly, and the line between public funds and the king's snack supply was, let's just say, flexible. The sound of bells wakes you. Soft metallic clinks drifting through the morning fog like whispers from old coins. But these aren't coins. They're attached to a herd of camels, each lumbering under the weight of freshly counted amole. And you're about to follow them into the belly of power. The royal courts, where salt meant status, taxes, and subtle manipulation. You're not walking anymore. Now you ride, barely balanced on a particularly grumpy camel named something like Ayob, who clearly resents your presence and communicates this through expressive sighs. The path ahead rises into the green highlands of central Ethiopia, winding toward one of the many shifting capitals of the Solomonic dynasty. Unlike Europe's fixed palaces, medieval Ethiopian emperors often moved their courts seasonally like stylish nomads with a taste for altitude. The term for it is the peripatetic court, which sounds fancy, but mostly means you're hauling paperwork and royal tents uphill every few months while trying not to trip over ceremonial spears. Your first glimpse of the court is more market than monarchy. The air buzzes with priests, nobles, traders, scribes, cooks, and musicians. Off to one side, a woman with henna-stained hands is sprinkling salt in a ritual circle around a visitor's feet. A sign of welcome, and also a subtle hint that you probably smell like camel sweat. Here, salt becomes more than just trade. it becomes tribute. Provinces under imperial rule were expected to send in tax shipments, and one of the most dependable, universal forms of payment was, you guessed it, a mole. Depending on your region, you might owe grain, cattle, honey, or a dozen camels worth of salt bricks, carefully wrapped and escorted to court by official tax caravans. Fail to pay? Well, let's just say that the emperor might request a visit, and nobody liked being summoned with that kind of smile. Interestingly, historians still argue whether this taxation system was as organized as some royal chronicles claimed. Some scholars think it was tightly bureaucratic, with ledgers, inspections, and embossed wax seals. Others think it was mostly run on honor, gossip, and the occasional bribe disguised as a wedding gift. And yes, some governors took their royal collection duties a little too enthusiastically. There are dusty reports of minor nobles hoarding salt for themselves, reselling it locally, and claiming the bricks melted in transit, which, while technically possible, is also just suspicious enough to get you publicly scolded during the next imperial ceremony. As you stroll past a cluster of guards dressed in layered cotton tunics and feathered headdresses, you notice one of them carrying a curious ledger. Each entry marked not by numbers, but by carved symbols. That's because many tax records were visual. Tally marks etched onto wooden sticks, stone tokens used as memory aids, or even salt sculptures set aside to represent owed quantities. It's not just imperial officials handling this economy. Church leaders are deeply involved too. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, powerful and deeply entrenched in daily life, received regular salt donations. These weren't just offerings, they were taxes sanctified by tradition, and very handy when it came time to preserve fish for Lent. In fact, many monasteries stored salt alongside sacred scrolls and ritual objects, which made them, oddly enough, part religious institution and part treasury. Imagine a vault where relics and rock salt share shelf space, blessed economics at its finest. You find yourself standing before one of the court's market tents, where a noblewoman wearing a gold-threaded shawl is overseeing a trade. Her voice is sharp, her posture relaxed. She's exchanging 6 amola for 2 bolts of imported indigo-dyed cloth, and she doesn't blink when her clerk bites the edge of one salt brick to check its quality. Apparently that was a thing. Another trader boasts about a shipment of salt being blessed by a monk on the way in, claiming it now prevents spoilage. There's no proof, of course, but the brick sells in less than a minute to a noble with 7 wives and a strong belief in spiritual food additives. This is the odd thing about the court. You'd expect riches in gold or gemstones, but here salt takes on its own kind of glamour. It's clean, it's versatile, and it doesn't rust. You catch wind of a minor scandal. One of the emperor's cousins has been accused of rerouting tribute caravans and selling half the salt to merchants from the Horn of Africa. The gossip is delicious, and the consequence even more so. He's been reassigned to a mountain monastery where his duties now include sweeping volcanic ash and reflecting for the next 3 winters. As the day wears on, you'll be invited to watch a court tax ceremony. It's part parade, part ledger review, part theater. Officials arrive bearing polished amole bricks on woven mats, which are blessed, weighed, and stacked into a geometric pyramid that now sits beside a pile of ivory tusks and a bored-looking goat. An elder in royal robes begins to chant a praise poem to the empire's abundance, the salt included. You're told the chant hasn't changed in 5 centuries, though the goat seems unimpressed. What's astonishing is that this entire tax system functions without hard currency. No minted coins change hands. No banks issue promissory notes. Instead, the economy moves through physical, meaningful exchange. Salt as currency, as tithe, as trust. One official remarks that during times of drought or war, salt remained the only thing that held value. "You cannot eat silver," he says with a shrug, then bites into a roasted yam that probably cost him 2 bricks and a sheep. You begin to see how economics here was never abstract. It was concrete, or rather crystalline. Wealth didn't just sit in ledgers, it glistened under the sun, carved into shape, wrapped in hide, and handed over with ceremony. And still beneath all this order, there were fractures. Salt bribery, smuggling, disputes over weight and purity. Some nobles swapped local salt with the cheap stuff, hoping the court wouldn't notice. Others undercounted taxes, claiming the camels died en route. A few even salted the books, literally, with inferior bricks just to meet quotas. Yet somehow the empire endured. The salt kept moving. And if you listen closely at night, beneath the drumming and hymns, you can still hear the quiet whisper of the salt economy breathing beneath the pageantry. Soon you'll travel beyond the courts, into the wild world of smugglers, black markets, and the odd little laws that tried, and often failed, to keep all that mineral wealth from disappearing like a sandcastle in the rain.